Of course, here's an expanded version of key point, ones in the style of ALLAN without headings or conclusion, around 600 words. The happiness is often imagined as a distant prize, something to be earned after a long struggle, a reward waiting at the end of an invisible finish line. Many of us live as if life is a series of checkpoints graduate. Get a job, earn more money, find the perfect partner, achieve recognition, retire comfortably. And we think that only when these boxes are checked will happiness finally arrive. But if you stop and examine the pattern of your life, you might notice something peculiar. Even when you reach these so-called milestones, the joy often feels fleeting. It slips through your fingers as though it was never truly there in the first place. Happiness is not a thing to be captured, held, or achieved in the future. It is not a destination on a map of your ambitions. It is not hidden behind a mountain you are climbing or behind doors that are yet to be unlocked. It is already present, flowing through the moment, but our minds are too busy planning, comparing, and worrying to see it. When we live as if happiness exists somewhere else, we enter a strange paradox. We chase it. And the harder we chase, the more elusive it becomes. We set conditions for it. I will be happy when this happens, when that person approves of me, when I finally get what I want. But these conditions are like trying to hold water in your hands for tightness. You grip, the faster it escapes. By placing happiness in the future, we are constantly postponing our lives. Every moment becomes a stepping stone to some hypothetical joy, and in that postponement, the very life we have, the only life we can ever truly experience, slips away unnoticed. Happiness cannot be forced or manufactured. It cannot be scheduled into a calendar or purchased in a store. It is not dependent on external circumstances, though we often think it is. Many people assume that if they just get the perfect job, the perfect house, or the perfect relationship, they will finally be happy. Yet, when these things arrive, the satisfaction often fades, leaving a subtle emptiness behind. This is because happiness is not an object outside yourself. It is a quality of awareness, a recognition of life as it is, not as you wish it to be. It is in the noticing of the wind on your face, the warmth of sunlight, the rhythm of your own breath, the simple fact that life is happening now. When you understand that happiness is not something to chase, you begin to see life differently. You stop seeing the present moment as inadequate, and you start to participate in it fully. You realize that the joy you have been seeking has always been here, hidden only by the constant chatter of expectation and desire. Life itself is not a problem to solve or a goal to reach. It is a dance, a movement, a song. Happiness emerges naturally when you stop struggling for it, when you stop measuring it against some imagined future. It is not the result of achievement, approval, or accumulation. It is the simple awareness of being alive, of being part of the unfolding universe. To truly understand this, one must allow oneself to be present, to notice without judgment, and to let go of the notion that happiness is elsewhere. It is not a prize at the end of effort, not a reward for endurance. It is the experience of life itself, here and now, unconditioned and free. When we stop treating happiness as something we must obtain, it is no longer elusive. It becomes visible in every breath, in every sound, in every sensation. It has been with us all along, patiently waiting for our attention, for our recognition, for the simple act of noticing. Absolutely. Here's an expanded version of Key Point 2FE in the style of Alan Watts, around 600 words, without headings or conclusion. Most of us are taught from a young age that dissatisfaction, anxiety, and unhappiness are problems to be solved, obstacles to be removed, and enemies to be defeated. We treat them as faults in ourselves, flaws that must be corrected, or as signals that our lives are out of order. And so we fight against them, struggling to escape the uncomfortable feelings, attempting to distract ourselves or suppress them with work, entertainment, or endless planning. Yet, in the very act of resistance, we give these feelings more power. The mind becomes like a stormy sea, thrashing against the waves, exhausting itself in a futile attempt to reach calm. True understanding comes when we realize that unhappiness does not require action, correction, or elimination. It requires observation. To observe unhappiness is not to indulge in it, nor is it to accept it passively as a permanent state. It is to allow it to exist without judgment, without the constant narrative of blame or shame. Imagine sitting beside a river and watching the water flow. You do not try to hold it in your hand, stop it, or force it to move differently. You simply notice it. You see its movements, its currents, its eddies, and in that noticing, you come to understand its nature. Emotions, too, are like this river. When you observe them, you no longer need to struggle against them. They can move through you. revealing themselves without controlling or defining you. Many people believe that, in order to be happy, they must remove every cause of discomfort, erase every negative thought, and create perfect circumstances. But life does not conform to such demands. Suffering and dissatisfaction are inevitable, because change is inevitable. People age, relationships shift, the world moves in ways we cannot control. When we try to control these things, we build a tension that tightens around the heart and mind. Observing unhappiness instead allows us to relax. When you look directly at your discomfort without attempting to fix it, a strange shift occurs. The very act of observation begins to dissolve the intensity of the feeling. The mind is no longer consumed by resistance, and a space opens up for awareness, for clarity, for presence. Observation is also the doorway to understanding. When you notice unhappiness without judgment, you begin to see the patterns that give rise to it. You see how the mind creates stories, amplifies fears, and clings to desires. You see how much of your suffering is constructed by habits of thought, rather than the raw events of life. And in seeing these patterns, you are not trapped by them. You begin to recognize that you are not the thought. You are not the emotion. You are the consciousness through which these phenomena appear. This recognition is liberating, not because it removes difficulty, but because it changes your relationship to them. In this way, unhappiness becomes a teacher rather than a tyrant. By allowing yourself to observe it, you gain insight into the nature of desire, attachment, and expectation. You begin to understand that struggle itself is often the source of suffering. When you stop resisting life, when you stop attempting to control or perfect it, you find a surprising ease. You find that your own awareness is more expansive than the limitations you had assumed. You discover that peace is not something to grasp, but something that emerges naturally when resistance falls away. When the mind ceases to tighten around what it cannot hold, and when the heart learns to witness rather than to conquer. Too certainly, here's an expanded version of Key Point, 3 in the style of Alan Watts, around 600 words, without headings or conclusion. 2. Happiness is not something that arises from the accumulation of possessions, achievements, or external validation. It arises from a sense of connection with the world, with others, and with life itself. Most of us live as though we are separate entities, isolated in a tiny bubble, struggling against a universe that seems indifferent or hostile. We look outward for fulfillment, believing that if we can just control our circumstances or gain the approval of others, we will finally feel complete. But the truth is that the sense of separateness is an illusion, a story that the mind tells itself to create order in the chaos of existence. In reality, there is no you, isolated from the river, the trees, the birds, the sun, or the wind. You are not a separate observer peering at the world from behind a glass window. You are the world experiencing itself through the lens of your being. To experience connection is to see that happiness cannot be found in isolation. The joy of life comes not from hoarding experiences, possessions, or knowledge, but from recognizing that you are part of an endless, interwoven network of energy and consciousness. Every breath you take is a continuation of the air that has moved through oceans, forests, and countless beings before you. Every heartbeat resonates with the rhythm of the earth itself. The separation you feel is a mental construct, and when you let go of this illusion, you begin to experience a profound ease, a sense of belonging that requires no achievement or approval. Connection is not merely an intellectual understanding. It is a lived, felt experience. It is the sensation of being carried along by the current of life rather than struggling against it. When you see yourself as interconnected, you no longer view life as a series of obstacles or threats. Pain and pleasure, joy and sorrow, loss and gain, they are all part of a larger pattern, threads in the intricate tapestry of existence. Happiness, then, is not about avoiding discomfort or forcing pleasure. It is about participating fully in this web of life, feeling its rhythm, and allowing yourself to be a note in the music rather than a separate conductor attempting to control the symphony. Many people suffer because they attempt to assert their separateness, to draw sharp lines between themselves and the world. They cling to ego, status, and ownership as if these could insulate them from the impermanence of life. But in doing so, they cut themselves off from the flow of experience, and they miss the deep, sustaining joy that comes from knowing that life is not something outside of you to conquer or control. It is something you are already part of. The trees do not strive to be free. They simply exist as they are, rooted and open to the sun, the wind, and the rain. When you realize that your own being is equally rooted in the universe, your sense of isolation softens, and with it comes a natural contentment that cannot be manufactured. Interconnectedness also teaches compassion, not as a moral obligation, but as a natural response to the recognition that others are not separate from you. When you see life as a unified whole, the suffering of others and your own suffering are threads of the same fabric. To acknowledge this is not to become burdened, but to awaken to the fullness of existence. Happiness, in this sense, is not a fleeting emotion dependent on external circumstances. It is the recognition that you are part of something vast, eternal, and inseparable. This understanding dissolves fear, envy, and longing, because it reveals that life itself is inherently complete, and you are already at home within it. Certainly, here's an expanded version of Key Point 447 in the style of ALLAN Watts, around 600 words, without headings or conclusion. We spend much of our lives in a constant state of expectation, clinging to ideas of how life should be, how people should behave, and how events should unfold. We set standards, create goals, and measure ourselves against an invisible scale of success and failure. And when reality fails to match these expectations, we feel frustrated, disappointed, or even trapped. Many believe that the path to happiness lies in controlling circumstances, in bending life to conform to their desires. But this is a subtle trap. The world is not made to satisfy our expectations. It flows in its own rhythm, indifferent to our plans, our judgments, or our anxiety. Trying to force life into our preconceived notions only tightens the grip of dissatisfaction. The more we resist, the more tension we accumulate, and the further happiness seems to slip from our grasp. Expectations are like invisible chains. They bind us to the future and blind us to the present. We live perpetually in what should be, rather than experiencing what is. The house is not perfect. The relationship is not ideal. The job is not as fulfilling as we hoped. And so we postpone our contentment, thinking it must wait until conditions align. Yet life, in all its richness, is happening right now. The moment we allow ourselves to release our rigid expectations, we open a door to freedom. We begin to see that the world is not something to be conquered, controlled, or corrected. It is a living, breathing phenomenon, a play of forces and events in which we are participants rather than masters. Letting go of expectations does not mean passivity or resignation. It does not mean abandoning goals or desires. It means cultivating a relationship with life that is fluid and responsive. rather than rigid and controlling. When we stop demanding that life conform to our notions of perfection, we discover a profound ease, a subtle joy that is always present, but often obscured by our insistence on how things should be. The trees do not demand that the sun shine in a particular way. The rivers do not insist on flowing in a straight line. And the birds do not wait for the perfect moment to sing. They simply exist in harmony with the natural order. And in their effortless presence, there is a beauty and serenity that we rarely notice in our human striving. Many people confuse letting go with giving up, but it is quite the opposite. By releasing expectations, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world. We become more adaptable, more responsive, and more attuned to the subtle rhythms of existence. We see opportunities where previously we saw obstacles, and we find satisfaction not in changing reality to fit our desires, but in aligning ourselves with the flow of life. This alignment does not erase difficulties, challenges, or loss, but it transforms our relationship to them. The same event that would have caused frustration or fear in a rigid mind now becomes part of the dance, a note in the music of life. When we let go of expectations, we also let go of the illusion that happiness is conditional, that it depends on approval, achievement, or accumulation. We realize that happiness is not something outside to be obtained, but a natural state of awareness that emerges when the mind stops resisting. The tension that comes from trying to control, the uncontrollable dissolves, and we begin to taste a profound contentment that has nothing to do with circumstances. Life is no longer a series of tests or hurdles. It is a continuous unfolding, and we are already part of the unfolding, already complete in ways we often fail to recognize. Absolutely. Here's an expanded version of key point factors in the style of ALLAN, around 600 words without headings or conclusion. 2. Happiness is not something that comes from fixing problems, acquiring things, or meeting expectations. It is not a treasure hidden somewhere outside, waiting for you to stumble upon it after the right combination of effort, planning, or achievement. Most of us spend our lives looking elsewhere, at the next promotion, the next relationship, the next experience, as if joy resides in some distant location beyond our current reality. And in this seeking, we often overlook the simple, luminous fact that happiness is not a destination, but a quality of presence, a way of being that exists when we stop resisting life. It is not something to manufacture or demand. It is already here, always available, though our minds are too busy grasping for it to notice. The present moment is the key to this awareness. When we allow ourselves to fully inhabit the now, without judgment or distraction, happiness begins to emerge naturally. It is not dependent on circumstances, for the mind is always capable of creating conditions for discontent. We can have comfort, wealth, or success, yet still feel restless, anxious, or dissatisfied, because we are measuring our lives against ideals, memories, or imagined futures. Happiness, by contrast, is not a measure. It is the experience of life unfolding, a recognition that what is happening now, breathing, seeing, hearing, feeling, is already sufficient, already complete, already whole. To be present does not mean ignoring the past or the future, nor does it mean giving up planning or action. It means engaging with life as it is, not as we wish it to be, and allowing each moment to speak to us directly. In the present, we are not trapped by regrets or anxieties. We are not caught in endless comparisons or the futile calculation of if only or not yet. We are simply alive, aware, and responsive. This awareness itself is the foundation of happiness, because it allows us to stop identifying with our thoughts, our fears, and our constant striving. When we see that these are passing phenomena, rather than the essence of our being, a profound lightness enters the mind. Presence also transforms ordinary experiences into something extraordinary. The taste of food, the sound of music, the warmth of sunlight, the laughter of a child. All of these moments are inherently rich and satisfying if we notice them fully. We are often too preoccupied to see the beauty in these simple gifts, yet they are always there, waiting for our attention. The mind that rushes ahead to the next task misses them, and in that missing, happiness slips away. But when we pause, when we inhabit the now, these moments reveal themselves as complete, self-sufficient, and sufficient for joy. Happiness is not something we add to life. It is what is already woven into it. Learning to be present is, in essence, a letting go, a release of the idea that life must be different from what it is. It is a surrender to the flow, rather than a struggle against it. When we stop trying to control, measure, or manipulate our experiences, we find a freedom that is both subtle and profound. In this freedom, the mind relaxes, the heart opens, and a natural contentment arises. This contentment is not fleeting, nor is it contingent on events or possessions. It is the recognition that you are already part of the world, already whole, and already enough, and that happiness is simply the experience of life fully and directly, without interference, resistance, or expectation.